This is Judge Joe Brown, and we're listening to We All Be News. News-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, scholars and laymen, boys and girls, the initiated as well as the uninitiated. This is Brother Ron of We All Be News, Radio, and TV. This is a special podcast. I'm just going to give a shout out to the one and only, the late, great Mr. Emerson A.L.L. Jr. That's Mr. Emerson A.L.L. Jr., a good friend of the We All Be movement, who passed away June 27, 2015. October 21st, 2015 would have been his 85th birthday. Mr. Emerson A.L.L. is arguably the greatest marching band director, music teacher that we ever produced out of the city of good abode. That's Memphis, Tennessee. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, scholars and laymen, boys and girls, Mr. Emerson A.L.L. Jr. arguably is the greatest band director ever produced by the Memphis City Schools. Mr. Emerson A.L.L. Jr., of course, was born October 21st, 1930. That's when he made his debut into this world, and the world was never the same. Had the chance to work on several projects with Mr. A.L.L., which were devoted to recognizing one of his greatest heroes, the late great James Melvin Lunceford, also known as Mr. Jimmie Lunceford, the guy who actually started music education in the city schools in Memphis back in the 20s as a volunteer while he was teaching at Manassas High School. That's Mr. Emerson A.L.L.'s alma mater, which he ended up teaching starting in the late 50s all the way up into the 80s. But Jimmie Lunceford started that, and Mr. A.L.L. spent the rest of his adult life trying to get recognition from Mr. Lunceford. And Mr. A.L.L. would tell me stories about how Mr. Lunceford would perform at his high school when he was in town to play concert dates. He'll give free concerts to the kids at Manassas High School. Mr. A.L.L. will open up for Mr. Lunceford as a member of the Rhythm Bombers. That's the Manassas Rhythm Bombers will open up for Mr. Lunceford. And Mr. A.L.L. told me how Mr. Lunceford will also have workshops for the musicians, the young musicians, learn from the older musicians in the band. And he told me how he was so influenced by Joe Thomas, the great tenor sax man for Mr. Lunceford from Kansas City, home of the great saxophone gods like Lester Young and Charlie Parker and Ben Webster and so many others. But Mr. A.L.L. said he was influenced by Joe Thomas and the Jimmie Lunceford band, the tenor sax man, and also about Mr. Lunceford, the way he carried himself, a true gentleman, a true visionary, a true humanitarian, a true and great friend to black people. And Mr. A.L.L. was a true and great friend to black people as he supported that mission of teaching the world how to love beautiful things through the education of music education. So how did I meet Mr. A.L.L.? Well, Mr. A.L.L. was interesting. It's kind of like a full circle story. I remember back in the late summer of 2007, I called Mr. A.L.L. after I seen an article written by our friend Mr. Preston Lauterbach about Jimmie Lunceford, entitled My Blue Heaven, about the lack of recognition that Jimmie Lunceford's incredible legacy was not receiving a lot of recognition in Memphis. And one of the people that Preston interviewed was Mr. Emerson A.L.L., and he struck me as somebody that was very passionate, very committed to making sure that his hero get his proper due, regardless how late it was. And so I found his number in the phone book, and I did a cold call, as they call it in the sales world, a cold call. And I told him, about who I was a little bit. And he said something to this. It was interesting. Mr. A.L.L. had a way of, he was very gifted with using words. Let's put it that way. Well, anyway, it's kind of like confrontational, sort of be like very aggressive, this guy on the phone. And so I kind of like was surprised by his, by his response. And then all of a sudden, he saw that I was serious about doing some type of tribute to Mr. Lunceford. And so he started talking to me. I guess it was a way of Mr. A.L.L. He catch people off guard by how he, talked. They make sure, try to size them up and see what they was about. And I guess I passed the litmus test. Come to find out that my father Ron Hurd Sr., my sperm donor, he went to school actually with his middle son, Antoine Abel. They both went to UT, University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and they both pledged Alpha. And quite possibly, I believe that actually, when I was a little baby, probably visited with Mr. Abel. That's how things come together. It's funny how the universe works. You know, this guy that I'm cold calling, I actually might have met when I was a little kid, when I was a baby. So, you know, this is back in 2007. So he connected with me, he put me in connection with some people. We ended up doing a thing at Manassas High School, which he was a part of, and I'm glad. And he saw that I was serious about what I was doing. And so we really been friends ever since that time, since 2007, visiting with Mr. Abel, talking to him on the phone. Him put me in touch with people who might want to talk to me about, you know, Jimmie Lunceford, about Memphis music. Him sending me letters in the mail. You know, he just had a beautiful handwriting. Mr. Abel was a true Renaissance man. He could do it all. You know, he was in his younger days, he was like one of the best swimmers and divers in the state of Tennessee. You know, he was a diver, award-winning diver and swimmer at Tennessee State University. So he could swim his ass off. And he could play that saxophone like nobody else's business. He had one of the best and most beautiful tones I ever heard on saxophone in my life. So, man, Mr. Abel had all these gifts, and also he had beautiful handwriting. He was a calligrapher. I call him a calligrapher. He had beautiful handwriting. So to receive a letter from Mr. Abel was really to receive a work of art. And now on top of that, too, he was a tremendous visual artist. I mean, just look at his work. Incredible work. He could do things with shoe polish and ink pens that I could never seen anybody do. You know, Mr. Abel was just this incredible. He could be intense, but he was very loving. He could be a blunt. He could be gruff with the language, but he was a very beautiful person, man, inside and out. A very giving person. I believe the reason why he might have been so like rough and gruff a lot of times and used a lot of explicatives, cursing like a sailor. He can make Dick Gregory blush the way he cursed. Is because, I mean, he was a very sensitive soul. He was a very sensitive soul. He cared so deeply. In a lot of ways, it's like he cared too much. Like he was really deeply concerned about the condition of his people. He wanted to give the best he had. You know, he really believed in empowering his fellow man and helping those in need. You know, he's the type of person probably would give his last dollar out of his wallet if he saw you was truly in need. So that was like a beautiful spirit he was. And, you know, he wasn't everybody's cup of tea because people get too caught up on the superficial. Like they get too caught up in what he said, how he talk or how he act. But it's not, to me, about what he says, how he says it. It's not what he does, it's how he does it. Like when Jimmie Lunceford, one of those famous songs, it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. Okay? So Mr. A was the type of person. So, man, he was a phenomenal artist all around. He was this artistic soul. Artistic to the bone. And it's part of his pedigree. Because I remember he told me his grandma used to play piano for the great blues singer Alberta Hunter. And his family got a deep, rich tradition in vaudeville in the entertainment history of this country. So Mr. Abel had like encyclopedic knowledge about, you know, the music business, about music history, about, you know, black history. I mean, man was very brilliant. He was a scholar. He's an intellect. He was an activist. He was a visionary. And he actually, like I said, he was probably the greatest band leader the city of Memphis ever seen or produced. And that says something because, you know, the tradition was started by the great Jimmie Lunceford, who arguably had the greatest swing band of all time. You know, and we were working on some things to bring that to light, to bring him more recognition. But it was from Mr. Abel. Just getting that brass note for Jimmie Lunceford would not have been possible because he'd been championing Jimmie Lunceford for decades in the city before I even came along in 2007. And, you know, everything's about timing. But, you know, he really saw something in me. He was very encouraging. You know, I picked up trumpet in college, you know, and he was very encouraging of my trumpet playing, you know, whatever. But now, as I think about it, times past, I might pick that back up again, you know, because, you know, life is what it is. Life is interesting. Life is strange. Had a chance to talk to one of Mr. Abel's good friend, the jazz great Charles Lloyd, who's also an alum of Manassas High School from the 1950s, that great era before Mr. Abel came on the scene. Now imagine, you know, right before Mr. Abel became the band leader for Manassas High School, 1957, the previous band leader was Matthew Garrett, who is the father of Dee Dee Bridgewater. The jazz great Grammy-winning singer Dee Dee Bridgewater was born in Memphis. Her father was Matthew Garrett, who was the band director of Manassas High School during that rich golden era where Miles Davis had to talk about it in his autobiography. A lot of his side man was coming from Memphis, not only from Memphis, but they was coming from that one particular school, Manassas High School. People like George Coleman and Harold Mayburn, people like Frank Strozier, people like Hank Crawford, the great saxophone titan who was Ray Charles' band director for a number of years. Booker Little, the jazz trumpet titan, Booker Little, who tragically passed away at the age of 23 on October 5th, 1961, is also alum of Manassas High School. And they all came out during this period. Charles Lloyd, jazz titan, still going strong at 77 years young, came out of Manassas High School. These are the type of people that Manassas High School produced just in the 1950s. And we're not even talking about the entire school system of the music greats that changed American history. You know, I mean, this is Memphis City Schools, y'all. And this is one school in particular, Manassas High School. Mr. A.L.L was also the high school band director for Isaac Hayes. And it was also an infamous incident in the annals of Manassas history where Mr. A.L.L actually kicked Isaac Hayes out of the marching band because he couldn't read music. And Mr. A.L ended up working for Isaac Hayes at Stax doing for the Isaac Hayes movement. He was his saxophonist, he was his arranger, helped out with a lot of stuff. And also he played at the iconic Stax concert in Los Angeles as well. So Mr. A.L lived this life that was incredible. He played for everybody, with everybody. He could tell you stories. And I was blessed enough to spend hours talking to him about his life and about these stories and to archive some of this history and hopefully make it available to the greater public sometime in the very near future. But in my opinion, in my honest opinion, I believe Mr. A.L was a great man. He was a great man. There's not many great men. There could be a lot of good people, a lot of decent people, but to be truly great comes from great sacrifices. I mean, this man was a small spark plug of a man, but he was a spiritual giant in my mind because he was artistic. He was an artistic giant. He was an artistic man. He was a big human being in terms of his humanity and his philanthropy and his talent. His talent was bigger than his body. You know, it was so outsized, and his generosity as well. If you get past all the gruffness and all the curse words, you find it a beautiful human being at the core. I mean, you know, he was with his beloved sister Annie Abel, you know, for 60 plus years. And she passed away in 2011. He came on for 4 more years almost. 4 more full years. And yeah, but also he was the visionary behind the celebrated Southern Heritage Classic. You know, he co-founded that with Fred Jones. He used to work at Stax with Mr. A.L. Matter of fact, they planned the whole thing, the Southern Heritage Classic, in Mr. A.L.'s house, literally on his couch. And because Mr. A.L. also was a college band director as well as high school band director, he had like a vast network throughout the nation, you know, so he was able to connect this because, you know, he was also alum of Tennessee State University. So he was able to put this together, but he never got the proper credit for doing so. He actually designed the logo for the Southern Heritage Classic as well. And he never got proper credit, and I was disappointed to find out that Fred Jones, who went on Facebook to say how great Mr. A.L was, that he was the greatest high school band director the city of Memphis ever produced or seen, they did not give him any type of tribute to Mr. A.L this past Southern Heritage Classic, just months after he passed away. He was not properly given tribute for what he done in order to bring that cultural event to light. So I just want to give him proper credit, you know, in my somewhat type of tribute, eulogy, whatever you want to call it. And I think that's about it, because I just wanted to say that. I said, Mr. A.L, we love you madly, and thank you for all you done, because like I said, he was a great man, and his family had to pay the cost for that. You know, there's a lot of great men in history and women through history whose family were the casualties for their greatness. They were sacrificed at the altar. But I say this to say that even Mr. Abel's family, you tell the greatness of a tree by the fruit it bears. His family is a beautiful family. You know, they turn out to be consummate professionals, college educated, productive citizens of our society, truly giving back and caring. So, you know, I know it might have been hard for them growing up with somebody like Mr. Abel, but he loved his kids. And you could tell, you know, in the pride they taken, you know, honoring their father and, you know, and telling people how great of a man he was. You know, he might have been hard, but it's because he had standards. And that's all I can say about that, you know. But look at his, you know, look at his beautiful family. Look how they productive. His beautiful granddaughter, you know, turned tennis pro. I mean, you tell a greatness of a tree by the fruit it bears. And you look at the fruit. So, with that said, I think that is all I can say right now about Mr. Abel. I got some great things coming up to either further amplify his legacy. And also, he was the first recipient, one of the first recipients of the Jimmie Lunceford Legacy Award. So that was an honor that I was able to give him that, because he really was very appreciative of that honor. And it was a blessing for me to be able to give him that award. It was truly an honor for me to be honored by him, that he accepted the award. And so it meant a lot to me. And so, like I said, the best is yet to come. Keep producing and pushing. We love you madly, Mr. Abel. You will never be forgotten as long as there's a person playing music and teaching music. And thank you so much for believing in me.